Okay, this is Rob having to whisper because there's a sleeping baby in the other room. I'm going to show you how to basically set up this kind of captive crank system. We saw this in my mechatronic art class, and I'd like everybody to try modeling this. So this is kind of a guide that you could refer to if you get stuck or if you want a place to start. So I'll show you what it looks like when I animate the model. And there it is. So this is a setup that doesn't rely on gravity to have the lever follow the crank. Okay, so let's see where to start. A good way to show you this stuff is to just go back in time and then move forward. But I think most of the complication in making this is in the sketch, and that's where you have to start. So I'll just start a totally new design. I'm going to make a sketch on this top work surface, and I'll make the circle at 2 inches. And I also need, if I right click, I can repeat that and make a 1/4 inch circle. And that's going to be basically the place where I have a tight fitting axle that goes through. So that would presumably be connected to a crank. So I want the axle to move with this disc. I also need to put that little pin over there that the lever follows, this pin. And so I want some specific place for it. And I think the best way to do that, maybe it's also going to be a 1/4 inch. We're just working with 1/4 inch dowel everywhere. So what I'll do is I'll make a guide here, and I would like that pin to be, let's say, 0.4 inches away from that edge. So the best way to do that, I think, is if I hover over this dimension, I can see that it's 2 inches, but it also says D1, so that's a variable that always contains the dimension of this larger circle. So what I can do is dimension my other circle either later or right now by saying D1 minus 0.4. And now it'll always be 0.4 inches smaller than that. So a little FX says that there's a formula in there, and if I resize this, you'll see that this adjusts with it. Okay, you could also use the offset tool, but that doesn't create any kind of constraint that holds. It just basically allows you to make a second circle, but you'd still have to dimension it. So there's really no difference between using that and the center diameter circle. You'd still have to put a dimension and put the formula in there if you want it to be related to this outer one. This is all of the parametric modeling stuff that I've been telling you about. If you go under modify and change parameters, you can actually see all of the variables and what they're at. And right now I'm going to add one of my own called slop, and basically just say that there's a kind of sloppiness to this thing. I want let me show you here. I want my pin to actually have room to move in here, so I don't want this to be exactly a 1/4 inch and for this to be exactly a 1/4 inch. Also, this lever has to move around this rigid axle that's embedded in the base, so I want some slop between there as well. And if you look at this, you can see it's very sloppy, but if I wanted to change it, all I have to do is modify that slop parameter that I've added, and I could make it something much smaller, let's say 0.009. So now you see the whole model tightens up, but there is still a space there. So that's why we have the slop parameter. I could call it anything I want. I'm just making a variable, and I'll be using that later. Okay, so I'm going to make on this circle, I want this circle just as a guide, so what I should really do is click on it and change it to a construction line. Then I can make my 1/4 inch circle here, and I'll just type in 0.25. Wouldn't be crazy since I end up seeing a lot of 0.25s everywhere in my model. I could just make another variable called dowel size, and then if I ever had an 1/8 inch dowel, I could pretty easily just change that in the user parameters, and it would change everywhere. For now, I'm just going to assume that 0.25 is the real number that I'm sticking with. Okay, so think right now I'm done with this part of the sketch. All I need now is my lever, so I'll draw that. And the first thing I'm going to do is make another guide for the start of my slot. So what I would like is if I look at the top of it, you see there's, like I said, there's some slop here, and so I'd like a guide that's actually the diameter of this pin plus the slop, and so let's make that. So the diameter is actually going to be 0.25 plus slop, and there it is. If I change the slop, it'll get smaller. So again, this is just a guide, so I'll make it a construction line, and then I'll start drawing my lever. So, well, actually, sorry, the slot and the lever. So I'll just make it kind of start out here and maybe be this long. And I'll do the same for the other side of it. I'm being really sloppy here, and what I'm going to do is use the constraints to get it all tightened up. So if I click on the two of those and say that they should be parallel, that's a constraint I need. I can click on the two of them and say that they're actually equal lengths. And on top of that, I can say that this is supposed to be tangent to this guide that I made. And if I click that right, that and that should be tangent. And this and that should also be tangent. Okay, so now I can just kind of finish that with a couple of tangent arcs. Go, and there we go. Okay, so it did put a tangent constraint there and a tangent constraint there. I don't see one here. See if this matters. I click there and there, and fuse tangent. Something happened. And trying to add a fourth tangent constraint it'll probably tell me that it's over constrained at that point, because it's over constrained because if these are parallel to each other and I have three other tangent constraints, this couldn't be anything other than tangent. So that's our slot, and now I'll just draw kind of a sloppy version of the actual lever. So doesn't want to do that. That's okay. So I'll make it really sloppy, and then I'll start adding my constraints. So this and this are supposed to be perpendicular, and so are these. And again, this can't be anything other than perpendicular at this point. So if I try and do that, it'll probably tell me that it's over constrained. It is, so it won't add a fourth one, sorry. So this and this should be parallel. Okay, and this line is also supposed to be parallel. So let's click this and this and say those are parallel. But that's over constrained too, because if they're all right angles, then of course it's parallel. So that's about it. I think I'll make this a bit smaller, and the easiest way to do that is to just drag it over. It lets me do this without messing up the shape of the crank because of these constraints. So I can't accidentally warp it into some strange shape. I think what I'm going to do is add tangent arcs to this as well, just so they look right. Okay, not sure what happened there, but I think maybe what I'll do is just delete these ends, which also deletes my constraints. So maybe that's not so great, but let's try that again. Tangent arc from there to there. No, I didn't like that. Alright, I can also make a different kind of arc. Let's see. Maybe a center point arc. No. So the first thing you choose, I guess, is the center point. Let's try that again. I will add a center point arc from the center go from there to there. That works. And I'll do the same over here. Just repeat that by right-clicking. I'll start, oops, all right. There, there, there. Lots of ways to do this, and I'm a little afraid that if I remove these constraints, I might kind of break. If I remove these lines, I might break those constraints, which you know, I could do that, and then I could start adding new constraints, like these are supposed to be tangent, and then it'll ensure that it keeps the same shape. Maybe another way to do it, and the reason why I'm interested in this is because when I'm trying to extrude this, I'll have three different profiles to click on. But I want this to really be one thing, so maybe what I can do is just make these construction lines. Now you can see, didn't like making that a construction line. Let's see. That one's a construction line. This one, it did not like making into a construction line. I'm not going to worry about it. I don't know. There are two here, so if you hold down the mouse button, you'll be able to select different parts. And so one is a sketch curve that has dotted line, and then the other one is not. So if I select that and hit delete, I'm not sure how I added an extra one in there, but now I'm left with just the construction line. Okay, so yeah, it's interesting because I lost my other constraint there, which was the midpoint constraint. Could be breaking things right now, but I think I'll be okay. So what I'm going to do here is make a hole for my dowel, but actually, you know, I want this hole to be sloppy because there's going to be an axle coming up from the base, and this should be able to freely, loosely rotate around it. So I'm going to add my slop again. You could skip all this if you just wanted to draw this thing and see it move in Fusion 360, but the idea is that we would actually be able to laser cut this. So we want to have this ability to make some holes tight and some sloppy. So I think we're all set. This is kind of everything. So now what I'll do is I'll just make this rectangle around the whole thing, and this will be my base. I'll make it much bigger than it probably needs to be, but it's fine. And then I will stop the sketch. I'm going to just tell you something now, and instead of going back to it, but this is a sloppy hole, right? So underneath there's going to be, in the base, this axle that pops up, but it's not going to be sloppy. So I think I kind of need another hole here, or a circle here. That's the actual size of the axle that's going to come up. So this one sketch is going to provide all of the geometry for everything that I extrude. So I might as well put that in. Also here, I think, I think since this is going to be an axle that goes right through the wheel, you can't really see it here, but it's actually, let's turn everything off. So for that. So here's the wheel axle, and there's the wheel. They're joined together with a rigid joint. I'll show you that later, but basically it looks like one part. And so this has to tightly fit in that hole, which we did. We made a hole that's exactly 0.25 inches. If we weren't sure, we can look at the dimension, and that's 0.25 inches. Okay, and if we look at the hole in the base, it needs to be slightly bigger. Can turn on a different visual style here, like wireframe, and you'd see that the hole in the it's not really showing us very well, but no, the hole in the base should be slightly larger than the actual axle that goes through this thing. So again, you could forget about all of this and just do it real. Everything at the same size, but I'm going to make this extra circle here, which is going to be 0.5 plus slop, and that's just a bigger hole, a bigger circle that I can use to extrude the hole and cut the hole in the base. Okay, that's everything I would possibly need to do at this point. And I will start extruding things. So I could go and click all of these little things, but the easiest thing to do is to just swipe like this. And if you swipe to the right, anything inside the box will get selected. If you swipe from the right to the left, anything touching the box will get selected. For some reason, there's always something that doesn't get selected, so I'll hold down Shift and now everything's selected. I don't really understand that. I will use press pull, and I'll make this go down. Let's assume we're dealing with 1/8 inch plexiglass everywhere. I probably want to actually measure it because it's probably not 0.125 inches, but I'm going to just pretend this is 2 layers, or it's a 1/4 inch thick piece of plexi, and I actually want it to go in a downward direction just because it makes things easier for me. So I'm making a new body, and this body is going to become my base. Okay, after I use the sketch, it turns it off because it thinks I'm done with it, but I'm not done with it. So, and in fact, I kind of screwed up already. I'm on my second operation and I've screwed up. So, I wanted those holes in there, a hole for a rigid hole, like a tight hole for the axle that's going to pop out of here, and then I wanted a sloppy hole here that the wheel can spin in. So let's go back, and if I right click and edit this feature, I could say, actually, I don't want everything selected, all 13 profiles. I want to leave this one out, and that was a tight hole, so I will leave that like that. And then this one is a sloppy hole, so I'll shift click these two, and what I'll end up with when I re-enter my dimension for some reason, what I end up with is, if I turn off the sketches, you can see I end up with a sloppy hole here and a tighter hole there, and the hole goes all the way through. So that's what we're looking for. Okay, so you could also just make this base have a thing sticking up out of it as part of the base body. And you know, we can make it simpler, but I'm trying to make it as real as possible, as physical as possible. So I'm going to actually make a separate axle that gets joined to this with a rigid joint instead of just extruding a kind of thing out of the base. So I think the base is done. I'm going to right click and create components from bodies. I'm going to rename it to base. Okay, turn the sketches back on, and I can hide the base for now. And probably just want to extrude this next. So I will select all of the stuff for the lever. Get in there. Okay, and make sure there's nothing weird there. No. Okay, that's the whole lever, and I think I wanted a sloppy hole here, right? So I'll just keep it selected the way it is, and I will press pull up 0.125 inches. That's the thickness of my plexiglass, nominal thickness. So at this point, I could actually make this a component. The reason why I'm making components instead of just leaving everything bodies is because I eventually want to make joints between all of these different pieces. And to make joints through this assembly menu, you have to use components. You can't just use a body. So there's not much to it. If I look inside the component, it's actually just a body inside there. So, but you can have a component made up of multiple bodies, but in our case, they're just going to be 1-to-1. So, and that's a component. So, I could just say right now, a new component, but I'm going to tell you why it's a problem. If I make it a component, I'm really saying that not only is a component, but that's where the component belongs. And I can tell you right now that the wheel is supposed to be under the slider. So I'm going to have to move this arm up in the air, and if I make it a component right now, it might cause problems for me. So I'll just make it a body, hit OK, and then I'll move it up in the air before I turn it into a component. Okay, and I'm going to move it up 0.125 inches, and that's that. So now I'm pretty confident that I'm done with it. and I'm going to create a component from it. I'll call that the, okay, I'll hide that and make my last piece, which is the wheel. So select all the parts of the wheel that matter. I think this is supposed to be a tight hole, right? I'm going to put an axle and jam it into that hole, so it's going to, I'm going to want to select everything except the inner ring, and over here, I want to just select all of this because I think this doesn't, well, this could be two parts, I suppose. Okay, I'll leave that off. I'm going to end up with a lot of components here, but this is how we actually build it, so why not? I will press pull, and I'll make it go up 0.125 inches. It's a new body. Actually, I know I'm done with it, so in this case, and it's right where it belongs, so I'm just going to make it a new component. There it is. So what's left? Well, I need to make that thing that sticks up. So why don't I do that? I'll show the arm just to make sure I'm doing it right. And I will just raise it up. And if I look, they're at weird increments here. So I could actually, instead of saying how long it is, I could say go all the way to the top of this arm. And that'll make sure it's the right length. You know, joining it would be a nice idea. It would just make it a part of this component. But I think I'm going to try and stay true to this idea that I'm making every individual piece a separate component. So it's really exactly like we would put it together in real life, all in separate pieces. Okay. And this component is called the wheel nub. Okay, what else is left? Well, I need an axle that comes out of here, so I will press pull, and this axle is supposed to be the base, so I can see. Oh, yeah, there's the hole. Okay, so I'm just going to turn the sketches back on, and this is going to be my axle that gets jammed into the base. And so how long is that supposed to be? Well, if I look at it from the side, I can remember that this thing is a 1/4 inch. There's actually an 1/8 inch gap here where the wheel is, and then there's another 1/8 inch. So that turns out to be 1/2 inch. So I can make it a 1/2 inch tall. Of course, it's not in the right place, but that's okay. I'll make it right now into a new body until I get it in the right place, and then I'll turn it into a component. So there it is, and there's the body, and what I'll do is I'll move it. I'll show you a trick here. I could kind of just move it down with the mouse, but you can see it's either too high or too low. It's not the right spot, and so there's a different way of doing this without using the manipulators. You can choose point to point, so I could click this and say that should land right there, and that's that. Okay, the only other thing that I do need this also. Well, let's do that. So just to give you a clue as to how this might work, this is supposed to be a 1/4 inch thing that sticks through here. How tall is it going to be? Well, I need it to be 1/4 inch plus another 1/8, and that's probably where I want it to stop. If I make it too high, then this thing will hit it every time it comes by the center. So I think that's 3/8 of an inch tall that this should be. Let me just press pull from, if I hold down the mouse, here's the trick I was talking about. I want to make sure I get the right profile, which is that inner one. It's supposed to be actually a 1/4 inch thick, and I need to type in my dimension here, 6.375, that's 3/8 of an inch. I don't want to join it with the wheel, I would just make it a part of the wheel. Again, I'm trying to make each thing a separate component, since I'd actually have to cut that from a piece of rod and jam it in there. Okay, so I hit OK, and actually, so I kind of broke my rule here. Let me go back. So before I undo, I said that it's a component, right? So if I try and move this component now into place, from now on, it'll start asking me if I want to go back to the original place that the component was put. So this is why instead of in this feature, instead of saying I want it to be a component, I would make it a new body instead. Let me just undo since I'm right here. What is that thing? Oh, that's actually, okay, so I can make this a component. That's my old. This is the arm axle. And let's do that extrude again. So I'll select the right profile. It's that. I will press pull it up 3/8 of an inch. And I will make it into a new body. Hit OK. And I'm going to move that body. So use that trick where I use the point-to-point instead and say top of that should land right there. I wanted to see if that worked out. I can see that it's the right height here. It's kind of light blue. Or I could change to see hidden edges. It didn't work so well, but I can do wireframe. Okay. Say OK. I moved it into the right spot, so now I'll make it into a component. I think I'm all set with making all the components I need, and so now I should just make the joints. Although there is a kind of a weird thing here where this isn't really supported. If I was really making this in real life, I think I would probably make some kind of spacer here. So since everything so far is in this one sketch, even though I could base this on several sketches, it's been easy so far. So what I'll do is I'll make a circle here that's going to be my profile that I use for extruding a spacer. So let me pull that up to 1/4 inch, 1/8 of an inch, and I will make it a new component. And right away I will call it my spacer. Okay, so I probably wanted to save many times between now and when I started, but living dangerously, and so now I'm going to start joining everything. And the first thing I want to do is make the base grounded, so I can't move that anywhere. That's kind of the base. After this, I will start just making as-built joints. I don't need to make joints where separate pieces get pulled together as a joint. I'm going to use as-built joints because they're already in place. So what are we looking at? We want the base to be rigidly connected to the arm axle. That's it, it's showing me that's together. Hit OK. I want the wheel to be connected with the wheel nub as a rigid joint. Okay. And I want the wheel to also be connected to the wheel axle rigidly. Okay, and I think so now I need some revolute joints. So I want a revolute joint between the arm and the arm axle. And it's asking me where it's going to land. That's fine. And I say OK. And then I need one more revolute joint, which is between the wheel and the wheel axle. Oh, yes. We'll see how this works. Okay, so I guess what I really want is revolute joint between the, let's cancel, revolute joint between the rigid wheel axle. It's connected to the wheel, which is connected to the nub, between that and base. And then when it asks where, I'm going to tell it right there. And okay, what I should see now is that I can drive any of these joints. If I drive this joint, I should see as this thing moves around. And if I were to drive, I'll escape, and drive this joint, I can see this thing move. So I think can revert back to the component's original positions. And I think what I need now is so we'll see what happens if I try and animate this model. So it goes right through that thing. So the way that we get around that is to use contact sets. Leaving them on all the time is too much of a computational thing for the computer, so we make specific contact sets that are between the things that matter. So in this case, we don't want that nub to go through that lever. And if I hit OK, I should be able to animate the model again. There we go. So I could be really picky and say, oh, well, that's a little too long. If I hit escape here, I don't think it's worth really showing you how to change that size at the moment, but we can talk about that in class. So what I'd probably do is go back to the original sketch and just kind of adjust the size. But there's a way that we can do it with some intention and say it needs to be this much shorter. But that's maybe an exercise for another time. Right now, we're kind of working in this way that's sort of like fudging the whole thing. So we haven't really done much measuring at this point. It's just kind of worked itself out. So one interesting thing is if you look at, if you try and drive this joint, see the slop happening. So there's a little bit of a lag when it comes back and forth. That's perfectly fine for us. This is called backlash or something, lash, but it won't matter for us. I think that's it. I think there's a whole lot of information there. It's a half hour, sorry. And if you have any questions, email me and we'll figure it out before Wednesday. Thanks.